Good afternoon, everybody. I'm really excited to be moderating this session where we're going to be talking about closing the gap for 21st century, for skills for the 21st century leader. Joining me today to have this conversation, online we have Ms. Zuriel Oduwale, and we have Chidima Lowanson, the country manager of Mastercard Foundation. Sitting with me here today, we have the Honorable Commissioner of Youth, Sports and Development. Thank you very much for joining us, sir. We have Mrs. Folúṣọ́ Gbadamosi of Jan, Nigeria as well, and Hilda from Joboman, Africa. Am I correct? We're very excited to be, my name is Tejmola Abisoye. I'm the Executive Secretary of Lagos State Employment Trust Fund. And one of the excitement about moderating this session for me is that all the resolutions from this discussion we can have the core responsibility of making sure that we harness and make sure it happens together with government and the private sector. So it's really a privilege to be doing this. And to set the context for our conversation today is that when we look at the demography in Lagos State, we have a teeming youth population. And from this population, the truth is that only 26% or thereabout have a university education. Another 14% have a diploma. So we're talking about 40% that have tertiary education to that point. The majority is sounding to us that the majority, 60% and thereabout, are actually just up to secondary school leavers. Lagos has the opportunity to take over to be the hub for IT skills, to service the world, to service Africa. But how real or how fast can we actually bridge or close this gap? Because they are there. We have a large population of young people that need jobs, that need skills to be able to actually work. And 51% of the labor force are actually self-employed. So it also tells you, how do we make sure that whether they're becoming industry leaders, running their own business or running other people's business, how are we going to be able to accelerate the delivery of all the programs in different buckets? How do we work together to make sure that the right people get the right jobs? So today I'm going to ask that our panelists, maybe I should start with the Honorable Commissioner, sir. If you can tell us first the things the ministry has planned, and then we'll listen to our private sector participants before we throw it up to the audience to ask questions, make contributions on how we can accelerate this, closing these skill gaps. Thank you very much, sir.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Well, most of the programs we have set for 2021 involves engagement of the youth, giving them required skill sets. What we've, from our own work that we've done over the past few years, we realize that quite a lot of our youth, even including the graduate ones, their skill sets are not required in the private sector. Those are the skill sets that the private sector are not looking for at the moment. They're looking for people who have a certain skill set, those in the ICT industry, those who are good with artisanship, especially those in the construction industry, such as tilers, painters, and all that. A lot of these people, tilers and co, the construction industry had to import all of them from the neighboring countries. What we're planning to do is reduce the training that we give our youth, especially in this area of tailoring, bid making, organizing, which is not what is required in the private sector. What our plan is to reintroduce a certain skill set, training in partnership with the private sector, because we need to give them a sense that doing vocational training in this area is not for those who are dropouts. We need to uplift those who are doing that and work together with the private sector, link up with the private sector, know what they're required, know what they require, and those things that require is not those people with sociology degree, not those with psychology degree. Even those ones, some of those ones can be employed somewhere, even in government. You know, excuse me, can I just, it's a bit joking. So our plan is to train them, look for ways to train them. We can do a bit of financing in that, train as many of them as possible, and get the required certification for them. Because if we train them and they're not certified, it will be difficult for them to get employment. And even some of them that do go through those training and get certified, we'll try as much as possible to assist some of them, even with placements with various companies as well. Placements by putting them, working together with the private sector and placing them in those schools. They will not pay for them. We will be giving them stipends on a monthly basis so that they can learn the trade. And for those ones who the employee or prospective employers feel that they can absorb, they will know during those training period where they're learning as they walk along. They will try and give them employment after they finish their training. Even if they don't get employed at that time, at least they will have experience in those areas. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Honorable Commissioner. I hear you speak to, so one of the plans is to actually have people train, and while they're training, they're also earning some money. Let me invite Folusha to please then share with us what Jan is doing and the possible areas of collaboration on this particular topic. Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much, Teju. Good afternoon, everyone. Okay, so there's two major issues, and the commissioner has already kind of spoken to them. So there's the out-of-school youth, and then there's the youth that are in school, and whether those youth in school actually have the relevant education, because our educational system, you know, has been proven by many to be quite obsolete. So what we do at Junior Achievement is we provide out-of-school programs that teach the youth different skills. So everything from financial skills to entrepreneurship skills to digital literacy and more. And the reason for that is that we know that experiential learning is more important than in-school learning, right? So we all went to school, you know, and when you got into the real world and you started working, you realized that a lot of what you learned, frankly, you're not really sure how it applies. So we're trying to teach them how to run their own businesses. So we have a flagship program called the Company Program. We've been running this now for over 20 years in Nigeria. And what it is that secondary school students start their own business, and they do everything from having a board of directors to having shareholders. So they learn the realities of running a business. And then they go forward and have a national competition, because it's all over Nigeria. Then they now go forward to the African regional competition. And if they make it far enough, they do the worldwide competition. So what we do at JAN is we really focus on giving the skills that are required for you to actually be employable when you come out of school, so that we don't continue to run into the issues of people not knowing how to be employable.
Thank you for that. Let me add this. So two speakers have shared about what in the German world they call the dual TVET system. So people actually have experiential learning study time, let's call it that way. They're learning and they are in school at the same time. I don't know if Ms. Lawrenson has joined us online, and if at this time she can contribute on the Mastercard Foundation program and how we can all work together. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Teju. I have joined. On Mastercard Foundation, we have our Young Africa Work Strategy, which actually aims to ensure that 30 million young Africans between the ages of 15 to 35 get what we call dignifying and fulfilling work by 2030. So our own part of that target in Nigeria is for 10 million of those youth. So it's really where this topic really sits, because those nearer to 35 may not be students, but they can be retrained to be entrepreneurs. And you've talked about what you do in Junior Achievement. For us at the foundation, we're very intentional in saying we are those trainings for underserved segments. How do we even include those who are underserved? Thinking of the internally displaced persons, persons with disabilities, looking at the gender story. How are the females that are being trained safeguarded and protected while they are learning? Either they are learning soft skills or they are actually in school. The safeguarding aspect is very much at the heart of what the foundation wants to do, to be sure there are safe spaces for women and men, young women and men, to learn. And how do we link this to actual work? And how those who are vulnerable in terms of their class structure? We can see that as a result of the pandemic, the inequalities just showed up. The private schools immediately transited to utilizing digital skills. But the underserved people, they just forgot a lot about education. In some houses, there just is a phone that the father takes out to work, even if there is a phone. So we look at those intentional projects, be it liaising with data sciences Malaysia to ensure that 2 million youth continue to work, to continue to learn, to have access to digital skills, to have access to virtual teachers who will teach them, like we say, things they can use to either find work or be entrepreneurial. And liaising with institutions like Jobberman or an enterprise development center to embed micro, small, and medium enterprise skilling to these underserved segments, regardless of their race, religion, their class, whether they are disabled or not, and focusing on how even schools can pull in these inclusive people because they are the lost crowd. So for the foundation, that linkage between training, whether in the TVET system or in the structural secondary and tertiary education, can lead to better jobs or lead to entrepreneurial activities in an inclusive way. Those are the things that we want to see also policy shifts in working with the public sector, as we are also designing with the Lagos State government how to ensure we bring digital devices to secondary schools, that regardless of their class structure. Those are areas where we think that if we're all intentional in the multilateral agency side, in the private sector, in the policy side, to see that upskilling is really tied to work, whether work means jobs or entrepreneurial activities that are dignifying so people are not taken advantage of. Thank you very much.
Oh, thank you very much, Ms. Lawrence. And of course, we're coming back to you. But right now, since you mentioned Jobberman, I really appreciate if Hilda can share a bit about what Jobberman is doing in this space.
Sure. Thank you very much. So Jobberman originally started out as a jobs platform linking people to work, young people especially. But then we realized that we cannot fulfill our job properly of having the right person in the right job if there's a skills gap. And so we've had to start backwards, integrating almost into training, into understanding what the needs of the youth are. And last year, actually, one of the things we did was to undertake a comprehensive skills gap analysis together with Mastercard Foundation. And there are a few things we discovered. So I think, first of all, there's a World Bank report that had stated already that when it comes to Nigeria, only about 2 to 4% of secondary and tertiary school graduates can be employed without interventions. And most of them, about 20% and above, require almost 1 to 4 years of postgraduate intervention, right? And what does that mean? That means most people are leaving university or leaving high school and they're not actually ready to work, or they just don't have the skills to work. So what we did was to do a survey, both on the supply side, so speaking to job seekers, and on the demand side, speaking to employers to figure out where is the gap. And we found a number of things. So first of all, there's inadequate training, especially for digital skills across the board. And even when it's trained, what employers are expecting to come out of that is not what job seekers are going to come looking like, for lack of a better word, both in terms of attitude and preparation, soft skills, and then even just the learning. You know, there's almost a backlog to say, even if you're a software engineer, the languages are constantly changing, the programs are constantly changing. What you are taught in first year university right now is obsolete. There has to be like a continuous lifelong education mentality that is instilled in young people right from the beginning of the education system, such that they know, even post-graduation, you have to keep on upskilling. And there has to be people, of course, trying to fill this gap. So what we did, again, was to ask certain things. During the pandemic, for example, how did digital work change? On our platform, despite the fact that very many jobs and industries collapsed completely, digital jobs actually grew 20%. It was incredible. But the thing is that also keeps highlighting the gap between those who have any sort of digital literacy and those who don't. That means we have to do better at that. The other thing is employers kept on saying readiness amongst the young people especially just doesn't exist. When it comes to the top skills, they're looking for things like CRM and email marketing. I know everybody goes always for the fancy ones, artificial intelligence, machine learning, but there's more simple things, web app development, mobile app development, all these things, even small, almost at a blue-collar level. How do you get the person who is your plumber, your tiler to use mobile money, that kind of skill set, There's still a gap there. So how do you focus on that and rank it as important as artificial intelligence engineer? And so what we did, the other gap, of course, highlighted was soft skills. The fact that even in those technical skills, soft skills and being able to integrate in a workplace is still missing. So we launched a soft skills curriculum, and this year, based off our findings, we're launching a digital curriculum as well, focused, of course, on postgraduate intervention. So it's not like a degree program or diploma program. It's an upskilling program that can be undertaken by anybody post-secondary school who is looking to do it, and of course, by any partner who would love to share in it as well.
Great work, Hilda. I'm really excited about what you share. So I'll take Zuriel, and is Zuriel there?
Yeah, hi, I'm here. Well, good morning, everyone, from Los Angeles. And to the organizers, I want to thank you all for inviting me to share just a little at this year's summit. It's a little after 4 a.m. over here right now, and seriously trying to stay awake and also still speak in a way that would make a little sense to us all. I've learned to only have about 8 minutes, so I guess it means I have to be as brief as possible also, but I want to take a different approach to all of this. So rather than just say, oh, this is what the government should do to ensure the right skills for youths. About 2 years ago, I was invited by President Abdel Fattah el-Sisi of Egypt to visit his country and meet with him. And that was a very unusual request for many, many reasons. I mean, first, Egypt, as you all know, is a very Arab nation, and their relationship with women is very patriarch in nature. And then second, I was allowed to be myself, meaning I wore my hat, I had on some jeans, and I was wearing boots. And the third thing is that we actually shook hands on national television, 3 times in fact. And that's very rare to see between a woman and an Arab leader. And then fourth was that my advice and support was actually requested by the president himself. So I gave it, and he listened. And then later, I learned that I was actually invited by the president because he was slowly ready to change many things in Egypt, starting with youth and girls inclusion. And he wanted his fellow citizens to see it happening with our televised meeting. Now, why did he do all of this? Well, it's because he understood the importance of 2 things: visibility and perception. Now, visibility, meaning that all the stakeholders inside and outside Egypt needed to see him to start the process of change. And then perception, meaning that the youth and young women in Egypt needed to feel that they were now included in the change process. And the reason I'm sharing this is because I believe that for any initiative to have a chance at real success, all the stakeholders must believe in it and buy into it totally. Now, exactly a year ago today, I was honored to meet with the governor of Lagos State, His Excellency Mr. Sanwo-Olu. I met with him at the State House in Marina, and I shared with him, as a young filmmaker, my ideas of incorporating basic filmmaking into the curriculum of Lagos State schools. That way, students would already have the basics of creating content for today's digital economy. And he understood visibility and perception, being the leader of one of Africa's largest economies. Now, unfortunately, the whole world shut down about a week later for obvious reasons. But I really do hope that we can continue this conversation until it becomes a clear reality. Now, here's an even greater demonstration of visibility and perception, because this summit is appealing to external investors and partners, and I can only share examples from my own experiences. The government of Senegal needed to begin to tell a new tourism story to African Americans. Before they sailed to the Caribbean and the US. Now, they realized that they could tell the story, but perhaps a foreigner might tell it better and more credibly. So, I created a short documentary sponsored by the government of Senegal about the history of Gorée Island to show it in schools and also on social media back here in the US for Black History Month. Again, they too understood clearly visibility and perception. Now that I've shared a little about the pot in the kitchen, let's now look at all the ingredients we would put into this pot. So that way, we can cook a delicious solution to support the growth and development of a viable and prosperous Lagos, and by default, Nigeria. I've seen old TV shows set in Africa, and I've always seen people walking in a straight line in the bushes, carrying things on their heads to sell. Now, I've also seen documentaries set in the 60s with people selling things beside narrow roads, and there'd be a few cars passing by. Now, today, I see a lot of stores and malls along the highway, like the Lekki Highway in Lagos, for example, where people can stop and shop. But the road for tomorrow is more and more the digital highway. So sellers must be ready to place their goods and services along that digital highway. And this takes me back to that meeting a year ago that I had with Governor Sanwo-Olu on introducing basic filmmaking in secondary schools. So that way, the students are much more ready to sell their contents on the digital highway. And because this highway can be accessed from any part of the world, the youth of the state can become a creative and a development hub. I mean, can anyone say Paystack? Many of you already know about it. I mean, it was started by two Lagos-based youths, and it was sold for over $200 million last year. And no, it wasn't bought by Nigerians. It was bought by foreigners who saw their services being developed, positioned, and managed on the same digital highway that the rest of the world is moving onto very rapidly. And of course, I cannot fail to mention here the need for the government to tuck right into all of this a program for gender equality and especially girls' education, because this is a very critical component. A few days ago, I was speaking with the UK Special Envoy for Girls' Education, Miss Helen Grant, and she sees this as an important part also to the development of Africa and especially its fifth largest economy, Lagos State. So, in summary and in closing, the government should engage in a strong visibility and perception initiative as a foundation to more credibility. That way, they can appeal to the support of local and foreign potential partners for development, because they are always, always watching. And second, they should change very quickly the curriculum in schools in order to reflect the opportunities of the future, such as digital knowledge, content creation, and focus less on the educational legacy subjects of the past. So, that was just a little that I wanted to share with you all. I want to thank you all again for allowing me the time to share from my own experiences. And I really hope that we can continue this conversation well after the summer. So thank you all very much. Eshe.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Zuriel, for sharing about that. For people participating online, if you have any questions, please put it in the Zoom chat box, the Q&A box. And if you have a question in the room, please, there's paper going around for us to share, to ask our questions. So basically, let me just talk quickly about what I've heard today again. Is also the fact that digital skills are required right now to close the gap. But we need not just the right curriculum, but the infrastructure to make it happen. Let me recognize very quickly the presence of the Permanent Secretary, Ministry of Wealth Creation and Employment. Alaja, welcome. The second thing, of course, is soft skills and integration in the workplace needs to happen. Visibility and engagement for partnerships, and of course the right curriculum. And I think, Zuriel, just to add to that, I think the right curriculum development is going to happen across all the sectors, is required across all the sectors. We have in this room as well, the country director for WAVE, that's West African Vocational Education. So just to put together what everybody has shared, and the thing I think, one of the things I think is very critical from what I hear, is Lagos State as a sub-national, with the size of our economy, we need a labor market information system that is inclusive of all participants, and by that we mean not just private and public sector. We're talking about the schools, both vocational and even our tertiary education participation. So that as people are requiring skills, the commissioner spoke about speaking to the private sector to know what skills are required, so that they can then do those trainings. How do we make sure that on one platform you can get all the information you need about the skills gap? You said you did a skills gap analysis. Is it Nigeria or subnational? Nigeria. How do we take out Lagos?
Special focus on Lagos.
With a special focus on Lagos. How do we use all this information to drive the trainings that are taking place in the different silos? The Executive Secretary of Lagos State Vocational Education Board is here, Mrs. Ronke Aziz. And how do we make sure, and I don't know if you want to share with us very briefly, Ma, on, okay, you tell, so different areas where LASVEB can quickly plug in to make sure we can scale, because scalability is extremely important to all the programs we want to do in our different buckets. But if that information is then available, the skill gaps, the vocational training schools can take that information from there. In terms of soft skills and integration into the workplace, how do we drive that very effectively, very quickly, to make sure that even the people that now have some technical skills can begin to work? Let me invite any of the panelists that want to share on how we can drive that very effectively and quickly to make sure that we skill up people who have graduated and they can even start to work. Because yes, when we talk about the curriculum, we mustn't leave the ones now behind, because we already have a gap that we must actually close. Hilda, Chidima, do you want to share on how we can do this very quickly, and especially with soft skills and making sure people get integrated into the workspace space? HC.
Yes, can you hear me? It's a space that you can't get enough of, because those who are ready to go into work or entrepreneurship, as Hilda has said, need to be upskilled. And sometimes not really, although that can be hard to say, not everything must be digital. There are some aspects of agriculture that there will still be primary production, but how do we introduce, it could be some handheld mechanical objects, mechanical machines to make their lives better. Well, that's quasi-digital, but I'm just saying that there is the touch and feel aspect of it. we get about 60% of our employment from agriculture. So, and if we attract the youth into there, knowing that there are different value chains in that space, that we can upskill them and say, how do they plug in, utilizing private sectors? Who are those who can aggregate the smallholder farmers, can train microprocessors to say it's not all about holding on the ground. There are many aspects of that value chain. There's the logistics aspect, there's warehouse that can pull in entrepreneurs and workers. And that's a strong point where the foundation focuses 70% on. And we've tried to find who are those private sector people who can cover a large set of individuals to train and link them to there. It could be an IITA, it could be Sahel Nourishing. And like Zuriel said, I mean, I was very happy she was talking obviously about her sector. And which sectors attract youth like moth, to lamps or honeys to bees is the creative industry. And 20% of our focus is on that because the youth automatically want to create content and upload it for people to like, or they can commercialize that. But how do they learn? We have all these stories about, it could be a girl, she had no work. She managed to find training that helped her out know how to create content or use a camera. And suddenly she's earning 300,000 naira a month because someone somewhere needs her services. If you think of the large numbers of people who are on a filmmaking set, they can be up to 500. Not all of them are actors, but some are script writers, some are prop boys who can be trained, some are photographers, some are trained in editing, and people can be skilled writers. So there are many elements of the creative sector. There's the hospitality industry, there's makeup. You see the young men and women who can be trained. That might not disappear within our localities because people still want to make up, and that can be dignifying work. So while we support e-commerce, all sorts of digital platforms to ensure that we are on that super highway to put Nigeria and Lagos State on the map to get the youth ready for the next sector. There are areas of ensuring food security, ensuring that youth do what they really love, to put themselves on that highway. So a lot of it is really private sector driven. Yeah. It's difficult for many elements of the public sector to create one policy. So while we're waiting for the good policies of the government, we enjoin other private sector companies, and not just as a token CSR, multilateral agencies, to look for ways where the youth can be pulled in into opportunities, train and retrain them. They will unlearn what they learned, some of the things they learned, and be ready and willing to learn new things. And from what we found in our experiences, it's not about giving youth money. It's about teaching them how to utilize that. And so we're building also financial inclusion, leveraging the financial services sector, that while these youth have been trained, you don't just get them ready and there's no next point. You get them bankable, you get them ensuring they have access to affordable loans. So when multilateral agencies like Mastercard Foundation partners with financial services institutions like banks,
in vocational skills as entrepreneurs. whether it's creative sector, whether it's the digital sector. And that leads me to, should I give you a few minutes? Okay, so that leads me, and the fact that we do want to encourage people, first, to aggregate the skills, but more importantly, to give them access to everything they need. So apart from training them and letting them go, how do you continue to train, mentor, and provide access to credit or finances for these entrepreneurs? Let me then ask our panelist, Mr. Akpade Idogo of Ren Money, to share about how he believes we can close this gap for the 21st century leader. Thank you.
Hi, everyone. Sorry I was late. I've been jumping on different links to try to find the right call, but I'm here now. Hope you can all hear me okay. Can anybody hear me? Hello? Okay, perfect. All right, I got a thumbs up from Zuriel. Yeah, I think this is a very significant one for us to deal with, and we think about this a lot as a company. There's a challenge here in sort of balancing the risk and the social objective, and then obviously the capitalist objective as well, with trying to provide access to funding for youth. One of the things that we kind of sort of want to see a little bit more of is how do we sort of value informal sectors a lot more than the formal sectors when it comes to things like youth employment. So we talk about youth unemployment in this regard, but from a funding perspective, we're thinking about it more in terms of youth productivity, right? So we're not necessarily thinking about how we get them into jobs, but it's how do we value the output that they have. So for example, if my brother-in-law right now, he's in university, and what he does on the side is he sells ring lights, right? It's this thing that you use to make yourself look bright on social media videos and stuff. Now that technically doesn't count as a business. So if we're looking at that today as our company, as a lender, it's very difficult for us to put a value on that and to try to understand, what sort of productivity this kid can have, right? So I think the challenge for us is more, how do we build models that can put values on the informal activities that these young people do. Unfortunately, I don't have any answer to that, but that is the big challenge that we've been racking our brains with. One of the things that we're exploring as a company is almost sort of redefining what we see as employment, right? We have two categories we lend to. We have employed individuals, and then we have self-employed individuals. Self-employed individuals, you typically want to look at a CSC document or something like that. Now, if you're a young person and you're involved in a small business, you're a barber or something like that, and you do it maybe on the side or you do it full time, it's not very likely that you have a bunch of sort of company registration or even a professional business account. You're probably running it on your own personal account in that regard. So yeah, like I said, that is the challenge that we see in this area, is how do we value the informal activities that people are doing in sort of for our youth, as well as for people in less urban areas, and then put some kind of like models around that to be able to determine what their future productivity will be. And that's what will then allow us to actually provide credit to these individuals. On a one-to-one basis, it's a little bit easier, but I think the solution has to sort of be scaled, right? It's really difficult to go to each youth individually and sort of ask them what they do and, how you want to create value for them. So we're trying to figure out what sort of models we can use. For example, how often are you making sort of transactional activity in your bank account is an indicator for us as to how often that's going to or how much more that's going to continue. We have a whole bunch of metrics like, the sort of education level you have. How do we balance that with the productivity you have going through your bank statements and going through what you actually do for a living? So that's the challenge we have. On the employment side, I don't really have any answers on that one. I think with the size of economy we have and with the number of youth that we have, the real challenge is definitely going to sit onto sort of like the, how do I describe it? I think that's where we get productive. But my feeling is there's already productivity going on there. The challenge is how do institutions like ours or commercial banks value that productivity in order to help them move from one level to the next level.
Okay.
Again, sorry I joined late, but that's where my head's at.
Okay. Thank you very much. We're opening the floor to questions, and what I hear Mr. Igodo say is that there has to be a way we can de-risk the activities of these leaders, young people. And I think from what Chidima has also said, maybe aggregation. I'm just trying to, because we have to come out with some resolutions that we want to see how we've gone with progress by the next summit. So how do we make sure that, how do we de-risk these activities? One I think may be aggregation in such a way that we can then see traction and how they actually earn revenue. So I have some questions here, and I want to, number one, soft skills training in Nigeria is very unique. Yet we don't have adequate content online on this. How can we get stakeholders who are experts at this to create this content, put on YouTube, and even though, and through this, they will raise funding for that? Do you want to answer that, Hilda?
Sure. So the job and soft skills training is freely available for every young person between 18 and 35. It's available on Coursera for free. It's available on Thinkific for free. You can sign up on it for a Telegram program. And now we're actually trying to get it even lower to SMS and USSD, so it's simple. But on top of that, Molade at Wave also runs a soft skills program that's quite thorough. I believe there's a number of organizations. So just reach out. For Jobman, I know it's jobman.com/soft skills, but also speak to anybody else in the room. There's at least 3 or 4 soft skills programs that are freely available in the room right now.
So we have to make this information also available. Yeah. I hear that as one of our resolutions. We need to make information to all these trainings that are free, very available, and make sure that people are aware of the...
And I think last year, over 60,000 young people did the Job and Soft Skills training, all free of charge. There's 0 cost.
Okay. Thank you very much. Honorable Commissioner, I have a question for you here. Is there a way the government can integrate the roles of the education and generation ministries? I think maybe wealth creation ministry, as this will give a wholesome educational system for the benefit of the whole community in future years. So can we integrate wealth creation and education?
Yeah, I think it's possible. It will require collaboration between the 2 agencies, and especially in terms of the school curriculum. We should, well, while not de-emphasizing the traditional subjects as well, but we should include some of these other areas in the school curriculum. That is, they can collaborate very well with wealth creation on that. Okay. So that a lot of these new ideas, soft skills, digital skill up, everything should be included in the school curriculum.
Fantastic. In fact, including the soft skills, let me allow Folusha to also speak to that.
I just wanted to quickly add, just to kind of piggyback off of what the Honorable Commissioner said, I think adding these programs to the school curriculum is very important. And that's something that we have been doing at we try to do at Junior Achievement Nigeria. So we go to schools and we run the after-school programs. But I think beyond the after-school programs, because that is obviously limited to a certain number of students, I think these things actually need to be added to the curriculum. And I think that we need to work a lot more on collaboration. So everybody here has something that they are bringing to the table. Yeah. Those online, those here physically. But we don't even really know what we're all doing. So how do we create a platform, as an example, for people like us in this room who have, whether it's the resources, the funding, the programs, whether it's online or physical, how do we aggregate all of that in such a way that we can actually benefit from it and the youth can really, have access to all these different programs? Thank you.
Awesome. Thank you very much. I think I hear that the second time. Aggregation of information needs to be local and free. Yeah. I'll quickly invite Ms. Aziz, are you ready? Okay. The Executive Secretary of the Lagos State Vocational Education Board, she's going to share, and then I'll invite Ms. Molade Adeni as well of WAVE to share a comment on our discussions today.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, and I've been listening intently so as to get as much information as possible in order to improve and the quality of the technical education that we run in Lagos State. And first of all, I would like to say something, that partnership is very, very key. We've talked about collaboration. It's very key if we are all to be successful. From what the partners or the moderators has said, there is so many unemployed youth in Lagos State. And none of us, as individuals, civil society, in private sector, the government, can do it all alone. There's just too many youth to train, to upskill, to get into employment. And so, listening now, it means we have to really work together. And I know that, for example, within what we are doing at the moment, we've had to look at the curriculum from the NAPTEP curriculum is what we use. And we know that from what has been said, the curriculum is outdated, the curriculum is not flexible, but at the same time, we have to make use of it. But how have we been able to somehow adapt? And the way we have been able to do that is to partner with organizations. And the private sector can come to us and say, we would like training in this area. And we sit down together and modify that curriculum to suit their need, the short term. And that has helped us in terms of getting around the curriculum itself. The other way that we have been doing is to actually look at what is outside. And I'll just give two simple examples. I hope I don't take a lot of time. The first one is really, we must continue as the government to be looking out in terms of what is it that the world needs in the next 10 years, because that's what we're talking about. What is it? And what is our own niche within that? China is noted for being the factory of the world. South Africa, probably engineering. Singapore is noted. What are we noted for? Or what do we want to be noted for? And we all work together, put investment in it, put the skills in it, and start doing that so that in 10 years' time or before then, when all these investors start coming to Africa because they've seen that Africa is the next place to be, we in Lagos State, we are ready for that. So partnership is very, very important. Collaboration is very important. And the other thing is everybody is training. We're all doing different training, and we're all doing the same training. But the curriculums are all different. Is there any way that we can all sit down together and harmonize these curriculum so that we have a sort of standard? And we all know that, yes, whether it's from whichever organization, we know we have a standard. I think that is very important. The other thing, the other thing that I would ask the panel is that I was talking to a parent, because we are now doing these flexible hours because of the COVID. 3 days in school, 2 days out of school. Out of school, you do online. But I met this parent, and I was asking him, I said, how's your child and so on? What's he doing? 3 days he comes to school, but what does he do in the other 2 days? Is he on our online platform? He said, Madam, he goes to do work, Olokoshe. And it resonated with me that parents are even taking active participation in the learning of their child when it comes to vocational. He says, Olokoshe. And then I started thinking, how do we recognize that within that 3 years the child is going to be with us? How do we recognize? How do we validate? How do we ensure it goes into the certification? And that is very key, because now there's a flexibility that you are having the formal education that is certificated, but at the same time, you are also carrying out, learning skills outside. But it is informal and it's not inside, and we don't recognize that. Imagine if we recognize that, how the landscape will change in terms of the technical education or vocational education. Thank you very much. I'd better stop.
Okay. Thank you very much, Executive Secretary. Thank you very much to the panel. I wanted to bring a slightly different dimension to it. So my name is Molade Adeni. I'm the CEO of WAVE, West Africa Vocational Education. As we look at the supply side, which is the young person, and as we continue to upskill them, as we continue to train them, I think it's extremely important that we also look at the demand side. It's one thing to train all of these young people, but who's going to sort of absorb them? So one of the work that we do at WAVE is really around rewiring hiring practices. It's not new to everyone here that employers still use biases to hire. They still use credentials as a bias to hire over competence. So as we continue to increase competence, we need to think about how do we also rewire that hiring system? How do we also let employers see that I don't need a university degree to be able to be effective in your organization? We have started, we did a study about 2 years ago where we actually just asked employers, educators, etc., even parents, why do you send your children to school? And everybody says to get a job. They go to school to get a job. Employers wants to hire, we train and connect people to low-skilled jobs like maybe waiter, waitresses, and you would find an employer who wants to hire a waiter who says, I need them to have 5 years working experience, I need a university degree. And you're like, but those skills don't translate into them being efficient on the job. So we need to also think about, we have a movement we call Ready for Work movement, where we publish articles, we also do a bit of advocacy work. But I think as we think about how to move ahead here, we need to really think about how we also bring in that sector of employers and make sure that we are rewiring that hiring system to be more inclusive, where we de-emphasize credentials and emphasize competence a bit more.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Ms. Adene. Just 1 minute, ma'am. So I think I just want to quickly summarize that so that we don't lose it in translation, is that there must be some cohesion in the ecosystem. For people training, for even the private sector and the skills required, there has to be some, and then there has to be a lot of advocacy work has to happen with regards to, because when people know that it's no more about the university certificate that people are asking for, they de-emphasize going to university as well. So as much as we want to work on the mindset of the young people to accept, to take pride, dignity in labor, and accept the blue-collar jobs as long as it pays your bills, be dignified in it and the whole process. We then need to also work on the private sector and begin to advocate for to de-emphasize university degrees. You wanted to share a comment as well? Very quickly, Ma.
Thank you. Please introduce yourself. Okay. My name is Titi Akisoya, and I'm the Vice President of the Chartered Institute of Personnel Management. Hilda talked earlier about soft skills, and I just want to elaborate and say, well, soft skills also encompasses what we in HR call behavioral skills and attitudinal skills. Those things need to be incorporated. So you were talking about Junior Achievement of Nigeria, of which I'm a proud ambassador, because when we were in Coca-Cola, we adopted Corona Ekoi, but we inculcated the values of the company as part of what we were, the Junior Achievement curriculum that we were imparting to the children, so that things like integrity, and collaboration, teamwork, are not just things on a roll-up banner. The children started learning it as they were developing the company that within the Junior Achievement framework. So I think it's time we start emphasizing some of these behavioral or attitudinal competencies like agility, critical thinking, or critical reasoning. Yes, it's all about mindset and behavior. And I can go on and on. Creativity, inquisitiveness, I'm also an executive coach, and one of the hallmarks of a coach is you have to be curious. And through your curiosity, you answer some questions in a skilled way. Let me end with this short story, and I'm sure you've seen it on WhatsApp. A child asked her gray-haired mom, "Mom, why is your hair so gray?" And cunningly and smartly, she told the young child, "It's because you've been troubling me too much. Each time you trouble me, a gray hair springs up." And the child then goes and comes back, children the way they are, and came back and said, Mom, Grandma is all gray. So who's been troubling Grandma too much? You know? And I mean, that's where the video ended. But in today's world, I would love that child to smithereens, because that child is bringing curiosity, you know, critical thinking, able to connect the dots. Meanwhile, years ago, I can imagine if a young child asked me that, I'll just say, keep quiet, you know, or that kind of a thing. So again, how are we imparting attitudinal skills or behavioral skills, not just the technical skills or functional skills that we're bringing into the skill sets that we want to encourage for the future? Thank you.
Thank you very much for that. So I think one of the areas we have spoken about is experiential learning would really help in developing this. And I think, so from our discussions today, so we have about 5 minutes to go, and I just want us to, I'll just take this comment quickly, and then I'll just round up in terms of what I think are deliverables from this session. There's a consensus that digital learning mode will continue to grow while classroom physical contact will shrink. My question is, how will our youth benefit from this new wave, considering the challenge of power and connectivity and prevalence in the country? I also hope that this new normal digital learning will not increase school dropout rate, as it has been observed in some climes, e.g. Italy. So I think from what we've said, digital skills, like Zuriel was saying, it's good to introduce it, that people have, at a minimum level, understand or are introduced to what digital skills are. But it's not going to be for everybody. I think that's quite clear. It's not going to be everybody. It's good to have. It's, if you ask me, for the 21st century, it's a necessity, but then not everybody would go the long haul with it. But what we then have to be thinking about is, how do we first increase experiential learning rather than just learning in classrooms? Because when you think about that, that changes the whole idea that learning is going to go digital. Because when we say experiential, you're learning for some time at work, you're learning for some time off work, basically. You're in school, and I use the German system example a lot. Before you even go and train, you must get a contract from a work organizer, from where you're going to work. When you then start training, you're 70% in school, 30% at work. It grows to 50-50, then it balances out, like you're now 70% at work and 30% at school before you finish and you're certified. How do we increase experiential learning in Nigeria for our young people? I like what Mrs. Aziz said. How do you recognize that experiential learning? Not that you finish training and then go and do an internship. How do we make that with the private sector, the learning schools, or the training centers, and make sure that this happens? So from what we've shared today, I think from what I hear as what must happen, we need to aggregate information on training first. So across all the different partners working, both in the private sector and the public sector, the Lagos State Employment Trust Fund is tasked with reducing unemployment. Unemployment in Lagos today stands at 19%. It's still fair because it shows that Lagos State is recovering better than national unemployment is at 42%, but it shows that Lagos State is recovering much better than the national rate. So how do we first put together, aggregate the information on trainings that are being offered across different training centers? How do we get the information of the skills that are required by the private sector and disseminate this to the training centers? Make sure the young people are also aware of the skills that are required. So you're not going to school just because you want to. If you're going to school because you want to work, then you better align with what is available. That's the kind of structure we have to make this work with. We have to, harmonization of curriculum for vocation, and I think this is actually one of the core responsibilities at LASVER. How do we harmonize this curriculum and make sure there's a minimum expectation for vocational skills? and then the advocacy, and of course, partnerships. How do we make sure that we can do this together? How are we going to, at LSCTF, if you don't know about us, we basically have 3 pillars, or 4, let me say 4 pillars. The flagship is we make access to credit for the young people who go through training and want to start their own business. Or you already have an existing business, you want to get affordable credit to be able to scale it up so that you can employ more people. The second thing we do is training employability. How do we make sure the young people who apply can get skills to work? And we do this in partnership with different training centers. So starting with demand side, we do the curriculum, and then we do the training, and then place them with the private sector companies to work. The third thing where we do is promotion of innovation, because we recognize what technology can do. And that's the question around when people say digital skills. It's so much more, it's important now. And I don't want us to think digital skills are like scary, because when you train agent bankers or agents, you're actually giving them digital skills. They don't have, it doesn't have to be complicated. It doesn't have to read like, I think we have to demystify what digital skills are as well. And I think it's actually a critical deliverable. It's how do we actually demystify it? People don't think I have to drop out because I don't have digital skills. How do we make sure that you understand that your phone is now a work tool? It's no longer just communications. And then we can put things together in a platform that provides access to all this information, and we can track what we're doing. And I think that's very important. We can track what's working, we can see what's not working, we can see what we need to do less of and what we need to do more of. So we have access to this, we give people these skills, and then of course we also make sure we do ease of business for small and existing business in Lagos. So if there's any issues a small business has in Lagos, Lagos State Employment Trust Fund is your go-to shop to also have this discussion. But today we're taking this responsibility of making sure that our resolutions here are actually going to be delivered. And by the next summit, we will give an update on what we've done and how the gap has closed. Thank you very much, everybody. Thank you, my panelists, my co-panelists, for being here. Members of the audience, Chidima, Zuriel, Mr. Igobo, thank you so much for being a part of this session. We look forward to continuing this engagement with you. Thank you.